Hi, I'm Toby Rapson. I'm the owner of Rapson Inc. and Rapson Architects here in Minneapolis, and you're listening to U.S. Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. I'm Tom Guild. On today's show, we've got the Seattle power duo of architecture. Tom Kundig of Seattle's Olson Kundig is a superstar in residential architecture, and he's got a new book called Complete Houses. But you can't have a world-class architect without a world-class builder. And we'll also talk with Kundig's close friend and frequent collaborator, Jim Dow of Dowbuilt. Later, you'll hear today's musical guests who go by the name Veronneau. They're a husband and wife duo whose tunes go around the world. And now, your host, Mr. Modernism, George Smart.
Hey, thanks, Tom. In every town that's more than a crossroads, there's a lovely modernist house that you probably love. A local architect designed it for a doctor or professor or an artist in the 1950s. That's a very common scenario, so common that it has a standard cast of characters. The wife, Madge, just passed away in her 90s, and the three kids, in their late 60s, can't agree on what to do. Helen wants to move in, but her life situation in Denver prevents that from happening. Nick in L.A. wants to sell it right away to a developer and cash out, because that's what you do in L.A. And Bob, who lives nearby and cared for Madge, wants to fix it up and sell it. They have terrible advisors. Cousin Ernie the contractor, who's never built or restored a modernist house, spent 5 minutes inside and immediately recommended a teardown, saying that anything more will be too complicated and expensive. Their neighbor Susie, the real estate agent, who was Madge's bridge partner, agrees with Ernie and is lobbying hard for the kids to hurry up and list it on the MLS. No one in this group consults an architect or a builder with modernist experience or the local preservation group. In the 2 months since Madge's funeral, the house is half empty and dangerously unoccupied. And when a house is empty, it is like music left unplayed. Less poetically, it opens up the house to unnoticed leaks, visits from critters, and teenagers looking for a place to drink. Moving all of Madge's stuff is emotionally wrenching for the kids, so they delay and delay and delay while the house sits all alone. And if that will is contested, wow, that's going to take some time. So let's get back to you. Perhaps you're a 20 or 30-something who loves architecture, but can barely afford rent and certainly can't afford a house like this. What are you going to do? What can you do? Well, you can ring up Helen in Denver. You can propose that to keep the house safe and to have someone securely there to monitor things while the family and Ernie and Susie decide what to do, that you move in. You'll live rent-free and pay for just the utilities, but you'll help clean up, pack Madge's stuff into boxes, and be the family's eyes and ears and hands on the ground. You'll be there for repair people and showings, because it may take them years to make these decisions, and meanwhile, you're living the dream at a price you can afford. You're going to think about this idea all day now, and when you move in, invite me over for a martini.
Ha.
U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs.
People who build their own home tend to be very courageous. These people are curious about life. They're thinking about what it means to live in a house, rather than just buying a commodity and making it work. That's actually a quote from architect Tom Kundig, whose work spans 6 continents and more than 40 years. Kundig grew up with an architect father, the late Moritz Kundig, but he was just as drawn to working with his hands. He learned to weld from sculptor Harold Balash and spent summers at sawmills. building a foundation for his wildly successful tactile approach. After earning architecture degrees from the University of Washington,
Go Huskies!
Kundig worked in the U.S. and Switzerland before joining Jim Olson's firm in Seattle. Today, Kundig is one of architecture's brightest stars, known for daring, inventive designs that have earned him global recognition. His new book, Complete Houses, chronicles 462 houses, with details on 38, including 12 never before seen. Here's George's conversation with a rock star of residential design, Tom Kundig.
Tom, in looking through your new book, I am just amazed how prolific you really are. I mean, I thought I knew a lot about Tom Kundig houses, but there were hundreds more that have come out in this book. How do you have time to do this, Tom?
Well, George, I was actually a little surprised how many books had been basically audited in the work in the last 40 years. And yeah, 400 odd houses. It's kind of amazing. That's 10 houses a year, which when you look at it that way, it's a little more believable that it's possible. But of course, there's been a crescendo in my career where there might have been just a few houses essentially at the early part of the career. And then now it's impossible to do all the work that comes to us. So we have to be careful.
This last 5 years in particular is an amazing number of new projects that you've commissioned that are listed in the book.
Yeah. Well, and you know as well as anybody, George, in the residential arena, you have to be in the project. You can't just sort of do a little scribble and then walk away from it and then hand it to a team. I mean, it is soup to nuts, everything from the first scribble all the way to CA with the fabricators on site. And your point is correct. I work many hours to because you have to. You cannot put it aside without being involved in not virtually, every step of the development, schematics, design development, CDs, and then, of course, construction administration. It's all crucial, especially in the residential realm.
And you have moved from being like a Seattle guy, Idaho, kind of close by, to being really all over the world now.
Yeah, we're on all continents except Antarctica. And God, I would love to do a project in Antarctica, really testing that inside out kind of agenda. But no, and of course, the residential arena is a perfect place to engage those cultures around the world and those different landscapes and those different situations. It's been a surprise and could not be just more jazzed about what I've been able to work on in the last number of years.
Now, you are one half of the Batman and Robin team. I'm not sure who's who, with Jim Olson, who also has been incredibly prolific and successful. Your firm, I suspect, is probably the most successful residential firm ever.
Really?
Yeah.
I can't imagine that, George, but we do. We work. I mean, residential is key to this firm. It really is the primary key that leads to the commercial work. There are a number of examples of important, larger commercial work that came from the residential arena. So we've never lost sight of that. And for us, the residential arena is critical to the culture of the firm.
And for all the non-architects out there, and I know there are many of you, this is highly unusual because most architects can't make it doing houses. But you've been able to tap into the economy and success of the Pacific Northwest and really turn this into an amazing practice.
Yeah, we've been lucky, I think. I think your point is spot on, George. We've been lucky with the changing economy and actually the changing focus on the home by clients. So we've been able to make it work. It's still a difficult category to actually make some financial sense out of it. But it is also true that after many years of doing residential work, sort of some of the core principles, frankly, to deliver that work. And what that allows you to do is be relatively efficient at those core principles that then allow you to do what we see the residential arena as, the research and development beyond those core principles, if that makes sense.
And you get a sense of what to expect. Like, you know what happens when couples disagree with each other, right?
Yep.
And you know what happens when you can't get the wood that you want from Taiwan. And, you get used to those kind of obstacles that might throw other architects who don't do many houses.
Well, and then we've probably also seen situations, not just interpersonal situations, but material situations, fabrication situations, climate situations, detail conditions that we have solved in the past, and almost more importantly, understand what a dead end would be with a decision. Because a lot of time in my past was spent kind of going into a dead end direction where it's just not feasible in the whole scheme of things.
Yeah.
Well, we can recognize that almost at the scribble level, and be able to be much more efficient about delivering a fine piece of architecture as a home.
Now, you are well known for incorporating these super cool gizmos into your houses. Walls that move, things that go up and down, railroad systems that move entire little pieces of buildings from one place to the other. Did the clients come to you with that already, or is that something that kind of evolves out of your side of the equation?
No, they're really coming to me at this point. They'll request it. And part of the conversation when they do request something to move, or, something kind of dramatic might happen to change a static house into a dynamic house, I'll say, well, that's great. What I'd like you to think about is that the device should not be seen as a gimmick. The device should not be seen as something sort of silly, but it's a device that actually has some architectural meaning, if that makes sense. In other words, if it actually moves a space or moves a flow of some kind in the space, and you want to do it manually, which actually I'm more interested in than maybe with a motor or some other device, then we know how to do that. We know how to deliver it. And to be perfectly honest, our ancestors did that when there wasn't a grid to get the power to whatever that situation was. So in a way, we just want to make sure that it's a meaningful device. And when it happens, it has meaning to the people that actually engage it.
I know when I interviewed Lou Maxon about his house, he was just talking about the whole experience of taking his office, which is a section of the house, and it detaches and rolls down this little railway more into the woods where he can have a private setting and commune with that. And it does serve quite a practical purpose in his life.
Yeah, well, and that original idea, George, I was working on a project maybe 4 or 5 years before that, on a project where one of the clients said, is there a way to design this house so when my mother-in-law is here that I can deploy her to another part of the property? And it was, of course, it was a sit and jest.
Yeah.
But I thought about it and I thought, well, I'm going to talk to Phil Turner, our gizmologist. And Phil said, well, of course, you can do that. It's got some engineering issues behind it, but we could actually deploy a part of the house, of course, to another part. And so when Lou was talking about it's similar to the brain, that other project I did many, many years ago, where the client actually said, I have to leave the house to enter my brain. In other words, he couldn't work in the house. And I think Lou is the same. You have to leave the chaos of the family, or, it's a different agenda. And to do any sort of creative work, you have to be inside your brain. And this is one way to move your studio.
Well, let's go back in time. In your book, Complete Houses, the first house you cite is a waterfront residence, which you did with Jim Olson. But our research team uncovers there was one before that. I think you did for your mom's best friend. It was a renovation.
Yeah.
So tell me about that project.
Well, it was kind of hilarious. It was actually, well, as many know, I didn't want to be an architect when I went to the University of Washington because my dad was an architect and I just didn't really want to participate in that culture. But at some point, I kind of made this move, beginning to be more intrigued by how architecture could fit me. And almost the moment I went into architecture, this project comes along. It's my mom's best friend, has a piece of property on Bainbridge Island, and says, I'd like to hire you to remodel this beach house. And it was a tall order. It was a high lift, but I think it was super important for me professionally.
And how did you meet Jim Olson?
Well, the Olson Walker was a super well-known name in the city of Seattle in the 80s, well, the 70s and the 80s. I went to Alaska with a friend of mine, and we had a little business up there, architecture business up there. We're doing some work, and he had to move back to the States, the lower 48. And I decided, well, I should probably move back to the lower 48 also, even though I loved my time up in Alaska. And then when I moved back, there were really a couple of firms that I was interested in joining at that point. And one of them was Olson Walker. And when I went in, I actually met Jim when I was being in. Jim didn't interview me, but I met Jim at the office in the firm when I entered to interview.
And that would have been Gordon Walker, right?
Yeah, Gordon Walker is the Walker, right.
Okay, yes.
Right. But I interviewed with another principal.
Rick Sundberg.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. It was weird. I interviewed with Olson Walker as it was transitioning into Olson Sundberg. Is that making sense?
Yes.
And I don't even know where in that transition it actually, where I was, but somewhere.
And when you got into the firm, you were working on houses as a member of different project teams in it. When did you kind of break out on your own and start doing the lead for houses?
It was kind of an interesting process, and it was Jim's generosity, frankly, that allowed me to sort of wing off to my own agenda. The most important thing about the office for Jim is that the work is tip top. It's really good. It has to be the highest quality. And so he was resistant to opening up somebody else, maybe having that freedom until he was absolutely convinced that that person would be able to meet that standard, whatever that standard was. Now, needless to say, I have a different kind of take. I have a different DNA in architecture than Jim. So for him to allow that different DNA to move over alongside him was, I think, extraordinary. And I got a client that was at a perfect time in my career where I had enough experience, enough wisdom to be able to take that sort of youthful energy and youthful need about certain ideas that I was thinking about and take them into the architecture world. And that was Studio House, which is a much different house than anything that the office had done prior to that project.
Yeah, Studio House was finished up, I think, in 98 and went on to win a whole slew of awards, one of several hundred that your houses have won since then.
Yeah, I think it was earlier than that, George. I think I started on Studio House maybe in 94.
Okay.
And then it would take 2 or 3 years to build, of course. So that would be 97 when it was done.
And by 2000, you were a partner in the firm.
Yeah.
And then things, really start to rocket for you and the practice.
Yeah.
As the media just loves the work of the firm. You're published everywhere.
Well, it's a little hilarious story. You remember Pilar Velades?
Yeah.
Well, she interviewed me for the Studio House. Born and raised Connecticut, lived in New York, so definitely an East Coaster. And when Studio House, the article came out in the New York Times, yeah, you're absolutely right. It was like it changed our lives, frankly. All of a sudden, there were a lot more inquiries. So I thanked Pilar. I just maybe a little bit like a puppy dog, to say, oh man, Pilar, thank you for doing this for me. And it's meant everything for me. And she kind of looked at me with those New York eyes and said, well, you're a nice guy and everything, Tom, but I did this for me and the New York Times because it's a good house.
Yeah.
So she kind of put it in perspective, which is the correct perspective, that if you're going to be successful in the media, your stuff has to be good.
It really does. And so photogenic. I mean, besides getting great photographers for your projects, these houses just naturally, with the light in the Northwest at different times of day and the way that proceeded through the house, just lit these things up in the magazines.
Yeah. Well, we have great light. We have great climates. And now we're working on all climates: snow, desert, forest, urban. It's just been an extraordinary ride. When I started in the firm, it was 12. I always say it was 12 people. And then within a couple of weeks, it was 7. So things were not looking good. But then it's, to your point, it started to change and crescendo.
Now let's roll forward a little bit. In 2007, you finished up some very well-published houses called the Rolling Huts in Mazama, Washington.
Yeah.
Which, when I first saw the photo, I thought these were like Star Wars attack characters, rolling across the tundra in the movie. What are these structures, Tom? I mean, how did you come up with the idea that these things would move?
Well, really, the Rolling Huts are a really important story about the residential arena. But the huts came to me because for the owner of the property, I did a project called Delta Shelter. Mm-hmm. That's the same property. It's about 40 acres along a river. And Delta Shelter because the floodplain went through there. Well, he had another part of the property that he wanted to start more of a guest or commercial or friend kind of agenda where he would have guest rooms, because Delta Shelter is only 1,000 square feet.
Yeah.
So he said his agenda was, well, can we build these little huts? And we looked into it and we couldn't. The local jurisdiction said that you already built one residence on the property. You cannot build, 2 or 3 others, even shelters. So we looked a little deeper, and it turned out that piece of property allowed RV camping. So the idea was to design these little RVs, quote unquote, RVs on wheels, so that we could build 6 of these little guest houses for the client.
And that is a very creative solution to a local rule.
Yeah, the zoning planners weren't too happy about that one, and there were some changes. But the point I also want to make about the Rolling Huts is the Rolling Huts are actually the beginning of us being hired by Nike for the LeBron James Innovation Center, largely because Tinker Hatfield saw the Rolling Huts and said, I want to talk to this architect that came up with these strategies for these little huts. So there's a direct link between the Rolling Huts, 280 square feet of stuff, to a very large building for the Nike campus.
Now, you have done very large houses. You've done houses in exotic places like Hawaii. You've done many, many houses in the islands of Hawaii. But one of the things that you've been known for and still do over the years are these tiny little cabins. So tell me about those.
Well, those are the root of shelter: food, water, shelter, and shelter is the most basic, the most intimate shelter I think an architect can be involved in. So for me, they are the basis of architecture. And even Glenn Murcutt, when Jeannie and I were down in Australia, said the residence is an architecture that the architects forget is the core of architecture in general. That's where you learn human scale. That's where you learn, how bodies move, what works, what doesn't work. So the hut is the extreme scale of that. And so to this day, that's, I think, one of my favorite project types to work on is the hut. And I continue to work on huts in all sorts of different locations.
And they're really so beautiful and intricately put together. I mean, you can just see from the photos that one could spend a weekend there or a month and be just fine.
Yeah, because really the hut, it's a small enough project. It's almost like doing industrial design. You can really get your head into every single aspect of that project. If you're working on some big commercial project, it's really hard to understand every corner of what you're working on, despite being on it really focused. But a hut is, you can immediately become, in a sense, part of the entire structure and understand it from top to bottom.
Now, as far as I can tell, your first international house, was that the one in Spain in 2009?
Yeah, I think it was Sigis.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was where I knew my life was going to change even further. It was a Norwegian photographer that was living in Paris that heard about me from his brother-in-law that was from South Africa. And that client was looking for an architect to work with him in Barcelona.
Wow.
So I immediately knew, oh, now this is the way media works. This is completely fascinating. Of course, that was before the internet, but it was just around the world.
And so many places since then. Let's see. You've been in Australia, right?
Yep.
You've been in South America.
Brazil.
You've been all over Canada. All over Canada.
Yep. Yep. New Zealand.
Uh-huh. And there are more and more all the time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Italy. Yeah. No, it's just super exciting. Mexico, quite a bit.
And how many people in the firm now? You've moved up from 7, I hope.
Yeah. Yeah, there's about, and it fluctuates a little bit, but we're about 350 people.
Okay.
Including everybody, including accountants and other staff.
And you're in New York as well.
Yeah. Yeah. We started an office in New York during the downturn in the economy when it seemed like everybody was leaving New York. And we just felt that you can't leave New York. I mean, New York is New York. And so we said, let's make a commitment to New York, our significant commitment, even if it only lasts for 3 to 5 years, just to make a point that you have to commit to these urban centers like New York. Well, it worked out great. It became a really viable, active office. And then now we're in Chicago.
Oh, you are? Oh, well, congratulations.
Yeah, we were invited into Chicago by somebody that was retiring and wanted us to basically take over the firm because he had real strong feelings about the people he was working with. They didn't want to start a new office.
Yeah.
And they are just terrific. All levels, just a terrific group of people.
All your projects are, except for the cabins perhaps, are complex. And I wanted to ask you, which of the projects you've worked on have been the hardest to build? I have a guess I want to throw out there first, and that was the house that you built in British Columbia on Naskell Bay, where you had to ship things 385 miles to the site.
Yeah.
Was that the hardest one?
Well, that was yeah. In some ways, that in the residential arena, that was one of the more difficult projects because in that case, it was way up there, and the only way to get there is by boat or by air. And everything, or not everything, but a lot had to be constructed in Vancouver, put on a barge, and then shipped up and then installed. And I couldn't have been more excited to work on a project like that because, of course, my background is in mountain skiing and mountain climbing, and I just thought I'd died and gone to heaven to work on that project.
You love skiing, don't you?
I did.
You did? It's over now?
I've been so busy. George. And I work in all the resorts. I work in Telluride. I work in Jackson Hole. I work in Mammoth. I work in Whistler, Big Sky. And I just haven't been able to get out on the skis.
I read that you narrowly escaped an avalanche one time.
I was 16 years old, and I was climbing with a group of that would ultimately become world-class mountain climbers. And we were planning on doing the first winter ascent of Mount Athabasca up in British Columbia. And Half the team actually got hit, was taken down
Really?
the mountain, but they all woke up kind of half buried in the snow. It was just on so many levels. It was lucky. I just saw the avalanche coming right towards us, and like right before it hit us, I mean, we were sort of hit with all the fluff and the air because it pushes a lot of air. But the heaviness of the avalanche, the heavy part of the avalanche, for the most part, missed us. Well, we fell into a crevasse as we were trying to escape so it was like, it couldn't have gotten much worse as we were running away from the path of the, which is almost pathetic if you think about it, but we were trying to just save ourselves and we fell into a crevasse.
That sounds like a future movie, Tom Kundig the film,
well,
right?
Yeah, how many things can go wrong?
You recently, this past summer, had an amazing party in the North Fork area of Long Island, which is a house and a pavilion that you designed. Tell me about that project.
What a lucky project for us. That is for a client that I now have done 4 projects for. That project came to me when they called me and said, would you look at this piece of property? It doesn't show very well in the North Fork of Long Island. And so I went up there with the client, and oh my gosh, it was, well, I describe it, it wasn't a meth lab, but I almost describe it as a meth lab kind of environment. It was blue tarps, there was garbage all over the place. It was really a tough situation, and it was overgrown, just totally overgrown.
Yeah.
But underlying all of that was this amazing potential. And the owner wanted to tear down the existing shingle style house. It was really in decrepit shape. I said, oh no, you got to save this house. You can't buy time. Let's see if we can make an architecture out of this house. And working with Rodman Primack on the project, Rodman and I had worked on their previous project, and he was really close friends with the client. We repurposed that shingle style home. I couldn't be more excited about that. Sometimes I actually think some of the more interesting projects are remodeling or repurposing projects.
Yeah.
And then during that time, the owner bought a prefab house that could not be put outside because it was fragile. So we did a pool house, and we just finished it, where the prefab could be sort of rolled in or rolled out depending on the weather conditions.
Like the Maxon house.
A little bit, except this is the garage.
Okay.
So we were building a place for the office, and absolutely true. Both are offices, both are deployed away from the building.
That's ingenious. I mean, they just must be crazy about you.
Well, I'm crazy about the client. They're wonderful. Honestly, that's another terrific thing about the residential arena. You just meet the most fascinating people, and you get to know them fairly well on a relatively intimate basis. And oh my goodness, they lead interesting lives. They have interesting thoughts. It's extraordinary.
I want to tell a story about Tom. Tom hung out with us in Palm Springs a couple of years ago on one of our U.S. Modernist trips. And he came to the hotel with his wife, Jeannie, and just checked in like everybody else. And all of a sudden, people are kind of coming over to me going like, is that? And I go, yeah. I go, really? I go, yep. And Tom Kundig was like a rock star in Palm Springs. He's very humble about it, but people kept recognizing you, Tom, as you went around town, didn't they?
A little bit. And it is a little bit of a surprise, George, because we're not in a big arena. You know, the architects, all of us, it's not a particularly large media presence.
Well, you have a lot of fans. It's a niche, Tom, and in the niche are devoted people, you know.
Yeah, well, which is really great because, man, you get into these fantastic conversations with those people, and they're interested in what you're doing, and you become interested in why they're interested in what you're doing, and then you become interested in what they're doing because they're all leading really interesting lives.
The new book is Tom Kundig, Complete Houses. That's followed up with next year, Tom Kundig, Complete Works. And in 2027, coming to a theater near you, Tom Kundig the Musical. Look out for that, folks. Thanks, Tom, for joining me.
Well, you don't want me singing, George. That is for sure, in the musical. But thank you, George. As always, wonderful spending time with you.
George was talking with Tom Kundig, and you can see all of his houses at usmodernist.org/Kundig. Jim Dow is a master builder who knows Kundig's work inside and out. Based in Seattle, Jim is a founder of Dowbuilt, a company that's been bringing bold, detail-driven residential architecture to life since 1980. He and Kundig first teamed up in the early 1990s, united by a shared love of craftsmanship and precision. Together, they've brought countless Kundig projects to life. With a background in science from Pacific Lutheran University,
Go Lutz!
And the University of Puget Sound,
Go Loggers!
There is nearly nothing that Tom can design that Jim can't build. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Thank you, Tom, George.
Jim, I got to say, I am a super fanboy when it comes to you. I have watched you build things with Tom for 20-some years. It's just like one greatest hit after another. It is amazing. How many projects have you done with Tom?
Wow, that's a very good question. We need to figure that out. I bet it's 70 to 100, maybe. I mean, we're on 7 or 8 right now around the country.
Yeah.
Too busy to stop and count?
That's right. They are.
Yeah.
And what's unusual about your collaboration is that you're doing projects for him and other architects all around the country. I mean, you've gone to Hawaii. I think you've gone to the East Coast. You've been in the Midwest. So that's kind of unusual for a residential construction company. How do you pull that off? How do you gather the critical mass of people to be 3,000 miles away from your home base?
Well, our secret has been to find really, really good people pretty much across the board. So that's really good people in the field. And now that we have spread across the country, each region that we work in is being led by one of the owners of the business. So they're bringing that ownership mentality to everything that they do in that region. And they're really, really strong, motivated people. And, you know, one of the things that we love is architecture. We're excited about design, and everybody that is running a region has that excitement. I mean, several of our principals are architects. They're actually, you know, not builders, not field guys. A bunch of them have come up through the field, but I'd say half of our principals are trained as architects. So we lean heavily toward really cool design.
Now, how did you and Tom first meet?
I met Tom when he wasn't a partner or an owner at Olson Kundig. He was the project architect, and we were on a project with Kirsten Murray, who's another one of the principals there at Olson Kundig, and we were trying to solve a problem, and we were leaning over a table, and I was actually the superintendent on the job, and Tom said, you know, this isn't going to work, and I sketched something out. He said, you know, that's a good idea, but what about this? And I said, that's a way better idea. And, you know, we're motivated to say yes, right? So we're digging in, trying to solve the problem. And Tom looked over at me and goes, you know, I can work with you. He probably doesn't remember that, but I do, because, you know, Olson Kundig was like considered the gods of architecture for us. And we were just a local small builder at that time, and really lucky to even get this job with Olson Kundig. So that was 35 years ago, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And then we just work hard, and we want to do a great job for their design. And the other thing we do is we lead from yes. It's like we don't say no to a problem. And as you know, in modern architecture, everything's a problem.
Yeah.
It's like, how in the hell are you going to build that? Well, we just say, we can figure that out. We're going to figure that out. It's tricky, but we will figure that out.
One of the projects that you and Tom worked on, which was really tricky and had a lot of potential problems that you solved, was one called the Pierre. Do you remember that one?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And that's for a longtime client of ours. And that was probably the hardest project we have ever built.
So what was hard about that?
Well, Tom wanted and the client wanted. This client is amazing. And she was game. See, that's the other thing is when you get great clients, it makes for great buildings. And she wanted to do it. And what the challenge was, we needed to slice this rock. So this is a big granite boulder. And we wanted the concrete, when I say we, it's Tom and the client, wanted the concrete wall to look like it was just cut with the stone was cut with a butter knife, and the concrete wall comes right out of the stone. And we needed to save the moss on the rock. Okay, so we had to figure out how to cut this stone perfectly, then blast it, then have the concrete come right out of the stone. And that concrete wall is tight to the stone. Okay, so that's like almost impossible to do. But we had a client and this very crazy architect that were game. And so we were game. It's like, we're going to figure it out. And we did. We figured it out.
And you saved the moss.
And we saved the moss.
That sounds like a bumper sticker you would have on the back of your car. Save the moss.
Right.
Yeah, save the moss. We're back working on that project right now, doing a little tiny remodel. And God, it's just breathtaking. It's so cool.
When was that project, Jim?
That was built 16 years ago, I think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Now, you've done projects in Hawaii.
Correct.
On the different islands for Olson Kundig. And I know from talking with other builders in Hawaii, that can be a time-consuming process because you have a lot of approvals generally to go through. So what's different about building in Hawaii, say, versus building in Washington State?
Doing the permitting process is difficult everywhere we work because these are complicated projects. I think the challenge in Hawaii is that everything has to be shipped from the mainland. And so logistics is a really challenging part of building in Hawaii. And the other thing, sort of countrywide is that skilled labor is really going down in our industry. And so finding good, skilled craftsmen, field people is very challenging, especially in Hawaii, where it's so expensive to live.
So I would guess you'd have to ship in the people as well as the materials.
Well, initially, when we did our first project with Tom on the Big Island in Kukio, we didn't have a presence there. We now have an office and we're working on all the islands. So we've probably got 70 or 80 people in the islands. And we've got a serious principal there who's one of the partners and owners in the business. So it's just finding good people locally. Young people don't want to work in the trades anymore, which is really sad.
It is sad. Now, I know we all know that Tom is a world-class architect, but you're a world-class builder, and world-class builders often save the bacon of their architects because sometimes their architects are a little too creative. And I know that you're a yes man in your philosophy, but what are some of the ways that you've helped Tom sort of see how to fix things from a builder's point of view?
Tom's interesting because he really comes from a little bit of a construction background. He worked in construction, so he's got a ton of respect for construction and the challenges of construction, but he pushes the envelope and he really, like you've seen these big cantilevers and these kinetic things, big doors and big windows.
All the
that
gizmos,
open.
they call them, right? The gizmos?
Yeah, yeah. And Tom will design the thing, and then he is very welcoming to us and the consultants to figure out how to make it work and like make it not leak, right?
Or fall apart.
You know, he doesn't want something to leak, but he doesn't necessarily know how to design it so that it won't leak. He's very open to us coming in and working with, waterproofing consultants or structural engineer to make sure the thing is actually going to work. And then often there are tweaks in the design that are necessary. The other thing that Tom is great at is being willing to tweak his design so that it works, just as long as the design's not destroyed.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where this partnership really shines, is that Tom knows that we want to do beautiful work. We want to build beautiful buildings, right? And so it's a back and forth, that collaboration, and the result is some amazing structures that get built.
Just stunning. Now, the Pierre was a challenging project. I understand one of your favorite projects working together was a ski house in Whistler, where you had to close the highway. Is that right?
Yeah. There's a massive steel beam that had to come up. We worked with Spearhead out of BC on that project. They're another big collaborator of ours. I mean, I can't remember how long that beam is, but it's huge. And if you look at the photographs, there's two of them, and it carries basically the main structure. And it had to be shipped at 3:00 in the morning because it was basically no traffic could go past us.
Yeah.
So that was a little hair raising.
And how far did that beam have to travel? How much highway did you have to close?
Oh, it went from Vancouver up to Whistler. And if you've been on that highway, it's this beautiful windy road. It is a 2-lane highway, but on some of the curves, the trucking would close both lanes.
Okay.
So it was sort of a roving closure of the highway because there were certain sections where people could not drive by.
Now, there have been countless magazine articles and photo shoots and design awards about the projects that you and Tom have worked on. Has anybody done a movie yet, or like a film project? Because I would think that would be in the works.
Yeah. It's a pretty special relationship. We're also very, very good friends. We own a cabin up in the mountains, way up in the mountains. Hopefully that we'll get photographs someday. Yeah, we just love doing this. I hope to keep doing it for years and years more.
It's really fantastic to see how excited people get just looking at the photos of these houses on Instagram and Facebook and other places. I know that must give you and your team an incredible sense of accomplishment to be able to bring these things to life.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the great things about being a builder is that you get to actually step back and look at something that you created. And, I wouldn't call this art, but it feels like art. And I was just in a project in Montana and driving up to the house. I'm just, oh my God, this is so beautiful. And it's very, very, very motivating and exhilarating to see these great buildings get built.
So I know that most of these houses that you're building, I would assume almost all of them, are not inexpensive. There's some considerable budget behind these houses.
Correct.
So I want to ask you a question for the folks that are thinking about doing a modernist house for themselves, maybe a cabin, something very modest. Maybe they have a budget of, say, $900,000, $1 million. So as a longtime expert in all this, what advice can you give the small homeowner starting out about how to plan for their small modernist structure, how to make some efficiencies that will help save them money?
Well, this might be unpopular with some of the architects that listen to this, but there are some really efficient and amazing prefab structures being designed and built.
Yeah.
There's a company that we are associated with called Plant Prefab out of LA. And
Oh, Steve Glenn.
yeah.
Sure.
Just an amazing product. And, my sister's going to do an ADU. And I said, we can't build for what they're building for. And they're nice designs. They let you fiddle with them a bit. If you're just starting out, there are so many good prefab companies out there that are doing decent stuff.
Yeah.
That's what I would do. Tom is an architect that it doesn't matter what the budget is. He will do it if it's good architecture. We've built some tiny little, really cheap buildings together. Solduck is a project on.
Oh yeah, what is that, like 200 square feet or something?
Yeah, and it's on stilts, and it's this incredible little, very simple building. You can be smart about the windows you put in it and how you finish it. You can do plywood floors and plywood walls and still have it be beautiful.
Yeah, sure.
And so it's harder to do a custom one-off home for cheap, but you can get some pretty great prefab stuff right now in the market.
Yeah, we've talked about quite a bit as the next big thing that's been coming for, 10, 20 years, and yet hasn't quite burst onto the market.
Well, it is happening now. It really is.
That's good to hear.
And I've been watching this for that 10, 20 years, and they didn't have it figured out yet, but Plant Prefab has figured it out. That's for sure. And they're doing some great stuff. I think they're sending a bunch of product to the LA fires.
Right.
Yes, they sure are.
That's pushed into the forefront.
Thank goodness for that. They have figured out how to do it and do it well.
So what's on the horizon for you and Tom? What kind of projects are you working on now?
Oh, man. We've got 4 or 5 projects in the works, small to big. We're still kicking.
Now, are you doing commercial projects as well, like apartments and condos, or just the houses?
We just do the houses.
Okay.
Like Tom has designed an amazing clubhouse in Utah in one of the new ski resorts. And one of our really good competitors is building that. It's really like a big house. Keep an eye out for that. That one's beautiful. I think you might have seen some images on Instagram.
Okay.
It's in Marcella. It's super cool. At bigger scale, so it's the lodge up there. Yeah, so we're just doing the houses.
Okay.
That's our sweet spots. I mean, some of the houses that we build are like we're doing a project with Jim Olson right now, whom we also love. That is as big as a hotel. It's amazing. Jim Olson's still working.
He's 80-something now, I believe, right?
I think he's 82 or 83.
Yeah,
He's very fit and still doing tons of work.
And going back a ways, I think you've worked on a couple of Paul Kirk houses as well?
Yeah.
He was kind of the original popular modernist in Seattle.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some really good architects in Seattle or have come out of Seattle for sure.
Well, Jim, thanks so much for joining us. Again, I am a huge fan of your work. All around the country, seems every area has like one person, one firm that really tops it out as far as expertise in modernism, because as we both know, not every builder can handle modernism. They might say they will, but they don't necessarily have the skill set or the subcontractors or the access to the materials, and you have done such a great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. This was fun.
Veronneau is Québécois vocalist Lynn Veronneau and UK guitarist Ken Avis, who blend bossa nova, French chanson, jazz, folk, blues, and pop. Since their 2011 debut, Joie de Vivre, they've released multiple top 10 albums and performed at the Kennedy Center and Blues Alley. Beyond recording, they mentor emerging musicians, run their Antidote radio show and label, and produce events like the Passport Music Festival. Here's George's conversation with Lynn Veronneau and Ken Avis.
Ken and Lynn, let's start with, how did the two of you meet?
Oh my goodness. So we met in 1994. We met at a music festival.
Okay.
And where we were both playing with different bands and really enjoyed each other's performance. And a few months later, we were formally introduced by a concert organizer who reached out to me and to Ken, but separately, and said, I have this project. I'd like you to sing on it. And I said, I have to check with my band. And he said, no, I don't want your band. I want you to play with this guitarist I just met. And Ken got a similar call, similar response. And that's how we met. We started working together. And just a few months later, we put a show together, just the two of us, and loved the experience.
Yeah.
Loved the experience a lot. It was so easy to work together. I liked the way he played. I liked his behavior, his demeanor, his approach to music was so refreshing. And it's been an adventure.
Yeah, it was a great start because we were both living in Switzerland at the time. So the festival was halfway up a mountain on the French side of the border, with the Jura Mountains in the foreground, and we were doing our acoustic thing. You could hear this beautiful reverb just bouncing off the mountains in the middle of summer. It was heavenly. A good start.
Yeah, it was.
And then was it just love at first sight, or did it take a couple of years to warm up?
Yeah, it took a few years, quite a few years.
I kind of liked it.
Yeah, it took a lot of years, actually, because we were both married at the time.
Ah, yes.
We both had, different partners at the time. And in the meantime also, so we were together for a couple of years. Then Ken moved from Switzerland to Washington, D.C. with his family. We lost track of each other for a couple of years. And, life circumstances changed in the meantime. And, fast forward a few years after that initial departure, we reconnected. Life was very different for us. And it was the right time for both of us to get together.
And it's been a happy time ever since.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
I'm a lucky guy. I really overachieved.
You did.
I can say the same thing, Ken. So, I know right where you are.
Yeah, so we've been together since 1999. So it's been a journey.
This first song is called La Mer. It's written by the French composer and lyricist Charles Trenet. It was a big hit in France, and in the U.S., it took Bobby Darin to make it one of his biggest hits. In fact, it became his signature song. By 1966, there were already 100 different recordings of La Mer, and by 2001, when Trenet died, there were more than 4,000 different recordings of it, with 70 million copies sold in total. Here's Ken and Lynn with La Mer.
Le long des golfes clairs à des reflets d'argent la mer, des reflets changeants sous la pluie. La mer au ciel d'été, au fond, ces blancs moutons, avec les anges si pure la mer, bergère d'azur infini. Voyez, près des étangs, les grands roseaux mouillés. Voyez, oiseaux blancs et ces maisons rouillées. La mer les a bercés le long des golfes clairs. Et d'une chanson d'amour, la mer a bercé mon cœur pour la vie. Danser le long des golfes clairs à des reflets d'argent, la mer, des reflets changeants sous la pluie. La mer au ciel d'été, au fond, ces blancs moutons avec les anges si purs, la mer, bergère d'azur infinie. Voyez près des étangs les longs roseaux mouillés. Voyez ces oiseaux blancs et ces maisons rouillées. La mer les a bercés le long des golfes clairs. Et d'une chanson d'amour, la mer a bercé mon cœur pour la vie.
When you two perform that song, I imagine the audience is just really in a great mood. I've seen audiences listen to that, and they just kind of melt into the music, don't they?
Yeah, it's that French chanson. You know, it's that period of time where there's a lot of nostalgia in the song themselves. And here in the U.S., there's such a contrast with the American version, where both, of course, is centered around the sea, but the original French lyric is a contemplative attitude, where you're just in the train looking at the scenery going by and just appreciating the simple things of life. The American version is more about love and somebody waiting on the other side of the ocean for you.
It's a different interpretation entirely.
To my surprise, you know, because it is performed in French and a lot of our audiences don't speak French, people still feel really connected to the French lyric and respond beyond our expectation. It's been, we call it our greatest hit. It made us millionaires on Spotify, right? Over 1 million streams, but not $1 million.
It was considered at one time to be France's best-selling song, even more than La Vie en Rose. Although since then, La Vie en Rose has retaken the #1 spot.
Yeah.
Little trivia about La Mer.
Yeah, and it was in movies and things, wasn't it? Mr. Bean's Holiday.
Yes,
Do you remember that
lots
one?
of movies.
Yeah, but it's one of those songs where when we recorded it, it was largely Lynn's mother who said, you know, you've got to do a French song on the album. And we were thinking about the order of the songs to go on the album. we really debated. It's the opening song of the album, and that's supposed to be the strongest hit and the most commercially viable. And we're going, will American audiences go for that? Will American radio go for it? And we took a chance, and it really paid off.
You two had a long-running radio show on WERA in Washington called Antidote. How did that get started?
It started when a new radio station opened in the Arlington area. I've always loved radio, particularly very local radio, because in many ways it's the only way that performers can get recognition and have a platform to have their music heard. And our local station, WPFW, Jazz and Justice, were always so generous to us, so kind. And we wanted to kind of repay that same kindness to other musicians. So we played all kinds of music. We love all kinds of music. So we did jazz, blues, folk, funk, a little bit of country even. And we would have big names who would come onto the program for interviews and even performances in the studio. But we always kept that alongside local and regional musicians as well, because we're just blessed with a really rich music scene in this area. Mm-hmm. And the local guys stood alongside. You know, they were as good as the big names, the national names that were coming through, and international names as well. Mm-hmm. So it was part of our mission. We have a mission to support the local music scene, and we've been doing that in many different ways ever since we started. And that was a great way to do it.
I was sad to hear that the station is part of the cutbacks for the public radio system.
That's right. It's disappeared now. It's very sad that it's disappeared. I keep thinking about maybe I should do a podcast program, but we do a lot more touring now internationally than we were doing at that time. So just the availability to do it is the challenge now.
Now, where are you going to be appearing in November and December?
So in November, we are back in the Washington, D.C. area. We're going to be out in Virginia. We're going to be in D.C. itself at the legendary Blues Alley, where we're going to perform our annual holiday show for 2 nights on the 18th and 19th.
We're going to be doing a show at a venue we've never played at, a fairly new venue called Manor Mills in Moncton, near Baltimore. And that's going to be one of the shows for our release of the new album, Blue Tapestry.
Okay.
And we're looking forward to that one. It's a beautiful barn that's been reconditioned and made to look very lovely and warm and inviting. So that's going to be a special show. And also we do all kinds of shows. We're going to be doing a house concert in the Falls Church, Arlington area in an old log cabin from the 1800s, which is somebody's home now. And those are the best shows because it's so intimate. You know, you have 50 or 60 people in a living room. Yeah. The volume's low. Everybody's listening. You get to chat to people before, during, and after the show. And we love that. We love that engagement with people, particularly with a show like Blue Tapestry one, because we tell a lot of stories in that show about Joni Mitchell's album and Carole King's album and the era that they came from, and the characters in the songs as well. So that'll be a very good, intimate show.
We're really looking forward to our holiday show as well, where we have really unusual arrangements of seasonal classics, songs in Portuguese, in Spanish, and English, of course.
Linda's a version of Sleigh Ride, which, believe it or not, we've never recorded this yet, we should do, but Sleigh Ride sounds way better in French than it does in English.
Oh, awesome.
Heidi hop, Heidi hop, Heidi hop. Hey.
Something like that.
Now, tell me about this next song from your new album, I believe, called Blue.
Yes, Blue, Joni Mitchell's Blue. Oh my gosh. So this entire project was just a venture in beauty and poetry and also discovery. And it's also a music historian. I don't know if you knew that. And loves just digging for architecture behind the music. You know, who are the cultural architects of the era? What was happening socially? And that entire episode of Mitchell's life is rich with social change. And, you know, musically, she's changing also. It's a huge departure from what she's doing. It had an incredible impact on American music. It really changed the way King and Mitchell changed the way in 1971 that women were presenting themselves in American culture. And it has this lasting legacy. The other part of Blue also is a nautical imagery that we've tried to illustrate in a very, very stripped down manner. It's Ken and I and our good fan producer, Joe Martinez on percussion.
Here's Ken and Lynn with Blue.
Songs are like tattoos. You know I've been to see before. Crown and anchor me. Oh, let me say. There's a song for you. Ink on a page underneath the skin, an empty space to fill. Well, there's so many sinking now. You gotta be thinking now. You can make it through these waves. And acid, booze, and ice, needles, guns, and cries. Lots of lives, lots of lives. But everybody's saying that hell's the hippest way to go. Well, I don't think so, but I'm gonna take a look around in the blue. Here's a shell for you. Inside you'll hear a sigh, foggy lullaby. There is your song from me.
What we try to do with that, it's mainly guitar and vocal, but we put some ambient sounds in there of chimes.
Right.
And it was inspired by a trip. I was once in the south of France, sitting by a dock on a beautiful spring evening, and the boats were just gently moving on the water, just gently swaying. And the lanyards and the chimes on the boat, the bells, were just ringing in the background. And we've tried to replicate that in the song to give it that sound of being by the sea. The song itself was the opening song from Joni Mitchell's album Blue in 1971. It was recorded at exactly the same time in exactly the same place as Carole King recorded her album Tapestry. And they were both enormously successful albums. Probably Carole King's was the more commercially successful. It had so many big hits on it. And Joni Mitchell's was considered the more artistically successful because that album Blue, right into the 2020s, was at the top of the list for people like Rolling Stone and NPR when they were talking about the best albums of all time. So it's really had a big impact, the album.
Ken and Lynn, thanks so much for coming on the show. It's been really a pleasure to meet you and hear your music.
Thank you so much for having us, George.
Loved it. See you again soon, I hope.
Thanks for listening. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by Diane Bald and the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Los Angeles, Malibu, Toronto, and Palm Springs. Okay, Tom?
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover documentation of 25,000 significant modernist houses, and access 5 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song is performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl, with guest research by Bobby Morris. Got a guest to suggest for the show? Write her at bobby@usmodernist.org. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive Incorporated, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guile. George and I'll be back soon with another Tale of Preservation edition of U.S. Modernist Radio.